As our nation continues to reel from the death of 19 students and 2 teachers at Robb Elementary in Uvalde, Texas, and following yet another week of horrifying gun violence across the country, joining us today to discuss change needed to keep our classrooms safe is National Education Association President Becky Pringle. Good morning, Becky.
Good morning, James. It's good to be with you.
It's good to have you back. In the wake of Valdez and so many that came before it, what can we do to implement change?
Oh my, James, I had the opportunity to testify before Congress on this very issue. And can I tell you that it was quite emotional for all of us as we listened to the gut-wrenching stories of survivors from Uvalde, a beautiful fourth grader, parents who buried their little girl, and the pediatrician who described how he was trying to save students' lives after their bodies were assaulted by assault weapons. It was inspiring to see their courage and strength and telling their stories after so much trauma and pain and hurt. And it was also infuriating to see some of those members of Congress dismiss those realities and not and stand in the way of the kind of common sense gun legislation that we have been calling for since Columbine. It's unacceptable that they are not listening to the majority of Americans who are saying pass comprehensive common sense gun legislation and do it now.
Now, what does the research show about the idea of arming teachers and educational professionals?
There is no research to support that. We all know that by the time someone shows up with an assault weapon, it's already too late. We cannot put that burden on our teachers and other educators throughout this country to be required to carry a gun and stand in the way of an assault weapon, which, by the way, we have heroic teachers who, in every one of these shootings, we know, tried to protect their students the best they could. But to put that additional burden on them when their job is to teach and nurture our students to help them learn every day, that is unconscionable. That is unacceptable. And it's just a distraction from those elected officials who are standing in the way of us passing common sense, comprehensive gun laws.
Now, Becky, how do we talk to our students about these tragedies?
Oh, James, it's so hard to talk to our students, but we need to first just give them the space. We need to listen to them. And then we need to assure them that we, the adults in the system, are going to do everything, and we're not going to stop. We're going to continue to fight for them. We're going to join them in their fight because our students are standing up and fighting for common sense gun laws too. And so we're going to join them in their fight, and we're not going to stop until those people in positions of power use that power to protect our kids. That's what we will tell them, and that's what we will do.
Now, where can the public go to take action or get more information?
Well, first, we want them to join us in the March for Our Lives this weekend. Of course, we know that is the march that is being led by our students. Go to marchforourlives.org, and you can find marches all over this country, including right there in Missouri. And we also want you to go to nea.org/gun violence to get tools and resources and supports to talk with students, to work with educators, to organize and advocate and take action with parents. Please join our movement.
Becky, with over 30 years ago, 40 years ago, in inner city schools, you had gun violence going on, and they resolved that by having metal detectors and security at the doors at these schools. For example, here in St. Louis, even when I went to high school, we had security guards. Why haven't they adopted that today in these schools and areas that are not inner city schools?
We know that we have to do everything we can to keep our students safe. What we have concerns about as educators is turning our schools into prisons, and creating an environment for our students that is not nurturing, that does not allow us to foster that love of learning and that creativity that we know all of our students need. We know that in some of our communities, and which all of our communities, we should have our parents and educators and the students themselves sitting down and coming together and collaborating on how best to keep our buildings safe. And we know that that starts with passing common sense gun legislation in this country.
We've been talking today with the National Education Association President, Becky Pringle, and we've been talking about what's been happening in our country, especially Uvalde, Texas. Thank you again for joining us on Morning Blend.
Thank you, James. Stay safe.
You stay safe too.